"Get out of here, old man. I'm not giving you a single cent of my money." Those words still echo in my head like thunder that never stops reverberating. That's how my son expelled me from his house, from the luxurious apartment he bought with the lottery money, from the new world he built without me. I was there at the door holding an old plastic bag with some clothes, looking at that man in an expensive suit who was once the baby I held in my arms when we didn't even have a decent crib. Are you enjoying this story? Then help the channel grow. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity now and subscribe. It's completely free. And this way, you'll keep receiving emotional stories that touch the heart and stay in your memory. Oh, and don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one waiting for you. He looked at me with those cold eyes, as if I were a stranger begging for alms, and repeated louder this time, so that the neighbors in the luxury building could hear, "Get out of here. You're no longer part of my life. I'm not supporting any old man, understand? This money is mine. I won it, I worked for it, and you won't see a cent." And he slammed the door in my face. There in that corridor, illuminated by cold lights and smelling of expensive cleaning products, I felt my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. Not because of the lack of money. God knows I spent my whole life without money, and that never broke me. But because of the coldness, the rejection, seeing my son, my only son, the boy I raised alone since he was 3 years old, treating me like garbage. My name is John Silver. I'm 72 years old, and throughout my life, I worked as a mason. My hands are thick, full of calluses and scars, marks of a lifetime carrying weight, mixing cement, climbing scaffolds under the scorching sun. I was never a man of many words, never had formal education beyond 3rd grade, but I always knew the difference between right and wrong. I always knew that a father doesn't abandon a child, no matter what happens. And that's exactly what sustained me during all those difficult years when my wife, Maria, left us. She left one Sunday morning, left a note on the kitchen table saying she couldn't stand the poverty anymore, that she had met a man with money and was going to start her life over. She took just a suitcase of clothes and never looked back. Not even to see her son crying, not to say goodbye, nothing. She simply disappeared from our lives as if she had never existed. Bruno, my son, was 3 years old at that time. He didn't quite understand what was happening, but he felt it. He kept asking for his mother every day, and I didn't know what to answer. How do you explain to a 3-year-old child that his mother chose money instead of him, that she simply decided he wasn't worth staying for? I swallowed my tears, hugged the boy, and said that Mommy had traveled, that she would be back soon. But the days turned into weeks, the weeks turned into months, and Mommy never came back. It was at that moment that I promised myself I would be both father and mother to that boy, that he would never lack anything, even if I had to work 24 hours a day. And that's what I did. I woke up at 5 in the morning, prepared breakfast for both of us, left Bruno at Mrs. Concheson's house, a kind neighbor who took care of him during the day for a price I could barely afford, and went to work in construction. I came back at 7 in the evening, dead tired, picked up the boy, gave him a bath, made dinner with the little we had, and still found the strength to play a little before putting him to bed. On weekends, when there was no construction work, I did odd jobs, painting houses, fixing roofs, anything that came up. The money never was enough. Actually, the money was never sufficient. Many times I went hungry so that Bruno could eat. He never knew about it. I pretended I had already eaten, that I was satisfied while my stomach growled with emptiness. But seeing that boy eating, growing healthy, was worth any sacrifice. The years went by, and the difficulties only increased. When Bruno was 7 years old, he caught severe pneumonia. It was one of the scariest moments of my life. Seeing that little boy burning with fever, coughing so much it seemed he was going to rip his lungs out, made me desperate in a way I had never felt before. I took him to the public health clinic, but the delay was absurd, and his situation only got worse. I didn't have money for a private hospital, didn't have health insurance, didn't have anything. That's when I did one of the most difficult things in my life. I borrowed money from a loan shark in the neighborhood. I knew I would regret it, that the interest rates were abusive, but I had no choice. I took Bruno to a private hospital. He was hospitalized for a week, took strong antibiotics, and thank God he recovered. But the debt remained. I spent the next 2 years paying that money, working on 2, sometimes 3 construction sites at the same time, sleeping 4 hours a night, living on bread and bologna. The loan shark had no mercy. He showed up at my door every 5th of the month with that unfriendly face, charging to the last cent. There were months when I had to choose between paying him and buying food. I chose to pay, because I was afraid of what he could do to me, or worse still, to Bruno. We managed the food somehow, ate lunch at the construction site, brought leftovers home, asked neighbors for help when things got too tight. Bruno was growing up, and I saw in him an intelligence I never had. He was a good student, always got good grades, even studying in a public school with overcrowded classrooms and unmotivated teachers. I was so proud of him. I kept all the tests with perfect scores he brought home, all the medals from school competitions, all the drawings he made. For me, he was the smartest son in the world, and I was sure he would go far in life. I encouraged him to study, even without really understanding what he was learning. I sat next to him at night while he did his homework and pretended I was following along, but actually, I could barely read the more complicated words. Bruno never judged me for that. On the contrary, he was patient with me, explained things when I asked. He was proud of me, of his Mason father who worked hard to give him a better future. When he reached high school, things started to get more complicated financially. He needed a new uniform because he had grown, needed more expensive school supplies, needed money for school trips. I couldn't deny him anything. I worked overtime, took more odd jobs, killed myself working. There was one time I went 3 days straight without sleeping, only dozing on the bus ride home because I had taken an urgent job that paid double but had to be finished in record time. My body ached, my hands bled from the wounds, but I didn't stop. Bruno needed that money for the graduation trip that was coming up, and I wasn't going to let him be the only one in the class who didn't go because his father couldn't afford it. But Bruno was a sensitive boy. He noticed my sacrifice, even though I tried to hide it. There was a day when he came home with tears in his eyes and hugged me tight, saying he didn't want me to kill myself working because of him, that he didn't need a graduation trip, that what mattered was us being together. That broke my heart. I held back the tears in front of him, said everything was fine, that I worked because I liked it, because it was for our future. But that night, after he fell asleep, I cried alone in the kitchen, thinking what kind of world was this where a father had to kill himself to give the basics to a son, where a 15-year-old boy had to worry about money instead of just being a kid. Time went by, and Bruno grew up, becoming a young man. He finished high school with good grades, but there was no way to go to college. We didn't have money even for bus tickets to the public university, let alone to support himself there. He tried some jobs, worked as an office boy, as a store clerk, as a helper in a supermarket. He never complained, was always a hard worker. I saw in him a bit of myself, that determination not to give up, to move forward despite the difficulties. We lived in a 2-room shack in a community on the outskirts of the city. It was simple, had leaks when it rained, the walls had dampness, but it was our home. I had built that shack with my own hands, brick by brick, in the spare hours I had. It wasn't much, but it protected us from the cold and heat, and it was where we had our memories. When Bruno turned 21, he started playing the lottery. I was never a gambling man, always thought it was a waste of money. But he insisted that one day luck would turn, that we would win and change our lives. Every week he spent a few dollars buying a ticket, and every week he lost. I didn't say anything. Let him dream. Everyone needs a dream, right? And if that gave him hope, who was I to take it away? I continued working in construction, even with my advanced age, even with the back pains that were getting worse and worse, even with the osteoarthritis in my knees that made me limp on cold days. There was no way to stop. The retirement I received was miserable, barely enough to buy food for a week. Bruno helped as he could with his salary, but he didn't earn much either. We lived tight, but we were happy. Or at least I thought we were, until one day it happened. It was a Wednesday, I remember well, because Wednesday was market day in the neighborhood, and I always took advantage to buy the cheaper vegetables at the end of the afternoon. I had come back from the construction site early because I wasn't feeling well, a chest pain that came and went, but I ignored it because I didn't have time or money for a doctor. I got home and found Bruno standing in the middle of the living room, holding the lottery ticket white as a wall. He was trembling, looking at the paper and the television alternately. "Dad," he said in a choked voice, "we won." I didn't understand at first. "Won what, son?" He turned to me with tears streaming down his face. "The lottery, Dad. We won the lottery. $50 million. The world stopped at that moment. I felt my legs weaken, had to lean against the wall not to fall. $50 million. It was a number I couldn't even process properly. It was more money than I had seen in my entire life. It was more money than I could earn working 10 lifetimes. It was the solution to all our problems. I hugged Bruno, and we both cried together, cried with joy, with relief, with hope. Finally, things were going to get better. Finally, we were going to have peace, comfort, be able to live without worrying about every cent. That night, we couldn't sleep. We stayed up making plans. We were going to buy a real house with several bedrooms with a yard. I was going to be able to stop working, take care of my health, have that knee surgery the doctor had recommended years ago. Bruno was going to be able to go to college, really study, fulfill his dreams. We were going to help the neighbors who always helped us, do charity, give back all the kindnesses we received over the years. We were a family again, more united than ever, with a bright future ahead. The following week, Bruno went to collect the prize. I went along, but stayed waiting outside the bank because I was feeling too nervous, afraid it was all a dream and I was going to wake up back to the harsh reality. But it wasn't a dream, it was real. Bruno came out of there with a smile from ear to ear, hugged me tight and said our life had changed forever. And it really had. In the first few weeks, we kept things simple. Bought some new clothes, a better television, fixed what was broken in the shack. Bruno started looking for houses to buy, but wanted to do it right, calmly, without hurry. I was so happy. I saw my son fulfilled, saw him daydreaming, making plans. And more than anything, I knew he wouldn't forget me, that we would share that blessing together, as we always shared everything. But things started to change subtly. Bruno started going out more, meeting different people. He bought brand-name clothes, started frequenting places we didn't even dream of entering before. I was happy for him, thought he was enjoying himself, living new experiences, but at the same time I felt a little insecurity. He was distancing himself, spending less and less time at home, less and less time with me. When I tried to talk about it, he said everything was fine, that he was just busy solving things, looking for investments, taking care of the money. I believed him, because I always trusted my son blindly. 2 months after winning the lottery, Bruno came home excited, saying he had bought an apartment in an upscale neighborhood of the city. "It's beautiful, Dad," he said with his eyes shining. "It has 3 bedrooms, 2 parking spaces in the garage, a pool in the building, a gym, everything. We're going to live like kings." I smiled, but inside I felt a tightness. Did we really need all that? Wouldn't it be better to buy something simpler and save the rest of the money for emergencies? But I didn't say anything. It was his dream, and he had the right to fulfill it. In the following weeks, he started furnishing the apartment. He bought expensive furniture, state-of-the-art appliances, designer decorations. I went along sometimes, but felt out of place in those expensive stores with the salespeople looking me up and down, judging my old and torn mason clothes. Bruno didn't notice, or pretended not to notice. He was too busy choosing leather sofas and imported curtains. When the apartment was ready, we moved. I took my few things in 2 old suitcases, my worn clothes, my photos framed in cheap frames. That apartment was beautiful, I couldn't deny it, but I felt like a stranger there. Everything was so clean, so organized, so different from our simple shack where I had raised my son. I was afraid to touch things, afraid to dirty something, afraid to break something expensive. Bruno said I had to get used to it, that was our house now. But I couldn't feel at home, it was too beautiful for an old mason like me. And that's when things really started to go downhill. Bruno started bringing new friends to the apartment. They were different people from the ones he knew before. People who talked about money all the time, about investments, about luxury cars, about trips abroad. They looked at me with contempt when I appeared, as if I were an employee, not the father of the house owner. I tried to be friendly, offered coffee, but they barely responded. Bruno also started to change the way he treated me in front of them. He no longer called me Dad, called me by my name. He didn't include me in conversations, ignored me when I tried to participate. It was as if he was ashamed of me, of the Mason father who had no education, who didn't know how to speak nicely, who wore old clothes. One day I tried to talk to him about it. I waited for him to come back from a party. It was already dawn, and he came smelling of alcohol and expensive perfume. "Son," I said, "we need to talk." He rolled his eyes, clearly irritated. "About what now, John?" The use of my name instead of Dad cut me like a knife. "About you, about us. You're different, son. You're distancing yourself from me." He laughed, a bitter laugh I had never heard from him before. Distancing? I'm just living, finally living the life I deserve. I worked years in those bad jobs, lived in that filthy shack, wore old clothes. Now I have money and I'm going to enjoy it. That hurt me deeply. That shack was our home, son. It was where you grew up, where we were happy. He shook his head. You may have been happy, I wasn't. I was always ashamed of where I lived, of inviting friends, of telling people my father was a Mason. But now it's over. Now I'm somebody. Those words destroyed me. I spent days unable to sleep properly, going over in my head everything I had done, wondering where I had gone wrong. Did I give too little attention? Did I work too much and spend too little time with him? Had he really been ashamed of me all this time and I never noticed? The relationship between us became increasingly tense. Bruno barely talked to me, spent whole days away from home. When he was at home, he locked himself in his room or received visitors who completely ignored me. I felt invisible in my own house, a ghost wandering through the luxurious but empty rooms of affection. 3 months after the move, Bruno came home with a woman. She was beautiful, well-dressed, full of jewelry. He introduced me as John who lives here. He didn't even say I was his father. The woman barely looked at me, greeted with a cold nod, and entered the apartment as if she owned it. From that day on, she started appearing more frequently, and with her came more changes. She started giving opinions about the decoration, said some things were tacky, that they needed to change. And one of those things was my room. She said it would be better to transform that room into a closet, that the apartment only needed 2 bedrooms anyway. I heard that from behind the door and felt my heart freeze. Bruno agreed with her without even thinking twice. That night he came to talk to me. He entered the room that was still mine and said, without beating around the bush, "We need to make some changes here. Viviane thinks it would be better if you looked for a place to live. I'll help you with rent for the first few months, but I think it's time for you to have your independence." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Independence? Son, I'm 72 years old. I can't work anymore. My retirement doesn't even pay half a rent. Are you asking me to leave the house? He looked away, clearly uncomfortable but determined. I'm not asking, I'm informing. You have 2 weeks to pack your things. I spent those 2 weeks in total shock. I couldn't believe that was my son. The boy I had raised with so much love. The boy for whom I went hungry, for whom I went into debt, for whom I worked until my body couldn't take it anymore. How could he do this to me? I tried to talk to him several times, but he avoided me. When I finally managed to speak, I begged him to reconsider, said I didn't need much space, that I could stay in any corner, that I just wanted to be near him. He said the decision was made, and that I was being dramatic. I looked for help with the few friends I still had, but no one had the means to shelter me. Mrs. Conchesson, that neighbor who took care of Bruno when he was little, had already passed away. The other neighbors from the shack had scattered after the community was removed. I was alone. On the last day before I had to leave, I made one last desperate attempt. I went to Bruno's room, which he now shared with Viviane, and knocked on the door. He opened with an irritated face. "What is it now?" I swallowed my tears and said, "Son, please. I know I'm nobody. I know I'm just an old Mason with no education, but I'm your father. I raised you alone. I went hungry so you could eat. I worked until I got sick so you could have what you needed. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for luxury. I'm just asking to stay close to you. Just that." He looked at me with those cold eyes I no longer recognized and said, "You did your obligation. I didn't ask to be born. You decided to raise me. That doesn't make me eternally in debt. Now I have my life, and you need to have yours, and your life is no longer here." That's when Viviane appeared behind him and said with a malicious little laugh, "Besides, you're ruining our vibe here at home. You look like a beggar wandering around the corners. We want to enjoy our money, have our privacy. You understand, right?" Bruno didn't reprimand her. He simply closed the door in my face. That night I packed my few things in a plastic bag. I couldn't sleep, sat on the bed looking at that room, thinking about everything that had happened. How had life turned this way? How could a son's love end so quickly? How could $50 million transform my boy into a cruel stranger? The next morning, when I was ready to leave, Bruno found me in the living room. I was with my bag of clothes in my hand, my heart broken into pieces. I looked at him one last time, looking for a sign of remorse, of regret, something that would tell me my son was still there inside. But I only saw coldness. "Where are you going?" he asked, more out of formality than genuine concern. "I don't know," I replied with a choked voice. "I'll try a shelter, something." He nodded, as if saying goodbye to a distant acquaintance. "Here, I bought this bus ticket for you. It's to the bus station. There you'll find more information about shelters." He extended the ticket to me. I looked at that paper, a bus ticket, the only thing my son was offering me after a lifetime of dedication. That's when I broke. I started crying right there in front of him, unable to control myself. "Son, please," I sobbed. "Please, don't do this to me. I have nowhere to go. I don't have anyone else. You're all I have." He took a step back, clearly uncomfortable with my reaction. "Stop with the drama. You're not going to die. You'll find a way like you always did." And that's when I said through tears, "I love you, son. I always loved you, more than anything in this life." He looked at me for a long moment, and for a fraction of a second I thought I saw something different in his eyes, maybe regret, maybe sadness, but it was too fast. He straightened his shoulders and said, "I need you to leave now. Viviane is arriving and I don't want a scene." I left the apartment like a condemned man walking to the gallows. In the hallway I tried one more time. I turned to him, who was at the door watching me leave, and said, "And the money, son? You said you would help me with rent." He laughed, a cruel laugh I'll never forget. "Help? Why would I help? You always said you didn't need money, that what mattered was love and those things. So live on that love there. Get out of here, old man. I'm not giving you a single cent of my money. This money is mine. I won the lottery, and you won't see anything, understand?" And he slammed the door hard. I stood there, in the empty hallway, hearing the echo of that door slamming. I went down the stairs because I didn't want to take the elevator, didn't want anyone to see me crying like that. I left the building and started walking aimlessly through the city streets. I had nowhere to go, didn't know what to do. The sun was hot, my legs hurt, but I kept walking as if the movement could calm the pain I felt in my chest. I thought about everything. I thought about the difficult days when Bruno was little, when I worked until I couldn't take it anymore, just to see him smiling. I thought about the nights I stayed awake when he was sick, praying he would get better. I thought about all the times I gave up everything for him, my own well-being, my health, my dreams. And I thought that maybe I had done everything wrong. Maybe I had loved too much, protected too much, spoiled too much. Maybe I had created a monster instead of a good man. I spent the next few days wandering the city, sleeping on park benches, eating what I could with the few dollars I had in my pocket. My body couldn't take it anymore. The pains were constant, but I continued. I had no choice. I went to some shelters, but they were full, or I didn't fit the admission criteria. A social worker told me I should look for my son, that it was the family's responsibility to take care of the elderly. I laughed bitterly. If he knew my son was a millionaire and had left me on the street like a dog, what would he say? But I didn't tell anything. Just thanked and moved on. On one of those nights sleeping in the square, I was robbed. They took the few dollars I had, took my documents, even took the bus ticket Bruno had given me. I was left with nothing, literally nothing. just the clothes on my body and a heart broken into millions of pieces. There were moments when I thought about giving up on everything. Moments when the pain was so great, the loneliness so deep, that I thought it would be easier to simply close my eyes and not wake up anymore. But something inside me, maybe the same stubbornness that made me survive a lifetime of difficulties, wouldn't let me. I continued day after day, dragging this old and sick body through the streets, looking for meaning, an answer, something. I started sleeping under a viaduct, together with other homeless people. They were good people, each with their story of pain and abandonment. We shared the little we had, protected each other. There, among those rejected by society, I found more humanity than I had found in my own son's luxurious apartment. One day, an older gentleman who slept near me, Mr. Antonio, told me his story. He had also been abandoned by his children after his wife died. The children fought over the inheritance but didn't want to stay with him. They put him in a cheap nursing home and never appeared again. He ran away from there because he was mistreated and ended up on the streets. "It's today's world," he said, lighting a cigarette he had picked up from the ground. "Children only care about money. Love isn't worth anything anymore." I agreed in silence, thinking that at least his children had put him somewhere, even if bad. Mine simply threw me into the world without looking back. Mr. Antonio died a few weeks after we met. He had a heart attack right there, under the viaduct. I held his hand while he passed away, saw the life fading from those tired eyes. None of his family showed up at the funeral. It was just me and a few other homeless people who accompanied him to the public cemetery. That haunted me for days. Would that be my destiny too? To die alone, abandoned, with no one who cared? The months went by and I grew weaker and weaker. My health was terrible. I coughed blood sometimes, felt chest pains constantly, had fever and chills. I knew it was serious, but I couldn't do anything. I had no documents, no money, no one. On a particularly cold morning, I was sitting on a park bench, shivering under a cardboard I used as a blanket, when a woman approached. She was young, must have been in her early 30s, and had a kind look. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked. I tried to answer but could only cough, a dry and painful cough. She knelt in front of me, put her hand on my forehead. "You have a high fever. You need a doctor." I shook my head. "I can't pay, miss. I don't have anything." She smiled maternally. "Don't worry. I'll take you to a health clinic. Can you come with me?" That young woman, whose name was Anna Paula, and who worked as a volunteer at an NGO that helped homeless people, literally saved my life that day. She took me to the health clinic, insisted they see me despite not having documents. They discovered I had severe pneumonia and needed to be hospitalized urgently. She mobilized her NGO, they got me a spot in a public hospital, and accompanied me throughout the process. I was hospitalized for 3 weeks. It was a difficult period. I fought death several times, but the doctors and nurses were incredible. And Anna Paula visited me almost every day, brought fruit, talked to me, gave me hope. It was to her that I told my whole story. I talked about Bruno, about how I had raised him alone, about the lottery, about the abandonment. She listened to everything in silence, and when I finished, she had tears in her eyes. "Mr. John," she said, holding my hand, "you are an incredible man. You did everything right. The problem wasn't with you, it was with your son who forgot the values you taught." That comforted me somehow, knowing that someone didn't judge me, that someone understood my pain. She told me the NGO had a shelter where I could stay after discharge, that they would help me get new documents, get the back payments from the retirement I hadn't received in those months. For the first time in a long time, I felt a little hope. When I was discharged, I went to live in the NGO shelter. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, organized, and above all, there were people who cared. There was a bed to sleep in, food 3 times a day, a hot shower. It seemed like a palace after the streets. I started to recover slowly, both physically and emotionally. Anna Paula helped me with the documents. We managed to get duplicates of everything. With the documents in hand, we went to Social Security to resolve my retirement situation. We got the back payments, it was a good amount, and I started receiving monthly again. For the first time in months, I had money of my own, a little independence. I managed to rent a simple small room in a boarding house. Nothing very comfortable, but it was mine. I went back to having a routine, waking up early, having breakfast, reading the newspaper in the square, having lunch at the boarding house. A simple but dignified life. Are you enjoying this story? Then help the channel grow. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity now and subscribe. It's completely free, and this way, you'll keep receiving emotional stories that touch the heart and stay in your memory. Oh, and don't forget, at the end of the video you'll find more stories like this one waiting for you. During all this time, I thought a lot about Bruno. I couldn't get him out of my head, even after everything he had done to me. I still felt love for him, even if he no longer felt it for me. I spent hours wondering what had happened, where I had gone wrong, how that sweet boy had transformed into that cold man. Sometimes I thought about looking for him, trying one more time for a reconciliation, but I didn't have the courage to face another rejection. My heart was already too broken to take more pain. One day, about 7 months after being expelled from the apartment, I was walking through downtown when I saw Bruno. He was entering a luxury car store, well-dressed, laughing loudly. Next to him was a woman, but it wasn't Viviane. It was another one, younger, more beautiful. My heart raced. I thought about approaching, about talking to him, but something held me back. I saw how he was, how happy he seemed, how his life had moved on without me. And I realized I wasn't missed at all. I stood there across the street, just watching my son live his new life. And I cried silently, right there in the middle of the street, in the middle of the movement of people. I cried for everything I had lost, for the son I no longer had, for the family that ceased to exist. It was Anna Paula who found me later that day, still wandering the streets in a state of shock. She took me home, made tea, listened to me vent. "Mr. John," she said after I calmed down, "you need to move on. I know it's difficult. I know a father's heart never forgets, but you have to think about yourself now. You've suffered enough. Your son made a choice, and that choice was to abandon you. You can't live the rest of your life waiting for him to go back to being who he was." I knew she was right, but knowing didn't make things easier. How do you give up on a child? How do you stop loving someone you loved since before they were born? How do you come to terms with the fact that everything you did meant nothing? The months kept passing, and I really tried to move on. I made some friends at the shelter, people with stories as sad as mine. We got together to play dominoes, tell stories, share our pain. It was a kind of informal group therapy. I also started doing volunteer work at the same NGO that helped me. I helped in the kitchen, distributed blankets to homeless people, kept company with other abandoned elderly. It was a way to give back all the help I had received, but it was also a way to fill the huge void inside me. It kept me busy, kept my mind away from destructive thoughts. It was on one of those volunteer work days, about a year after being expelled from the apartment, that something unexpected happened. I was helping distribute soup to homeless people under a viaduct when a man approached. He wore a hood and sunglasses, clearly trying to hide his face, but I recognized him immediately. It was Bruno. My heart almost jumped out of my mouth. I was paralyzed, holding the soup ladle in the air, unable to react. He approached slowly, took off his glasses, and our eyes met. I saw he was different, thinner, with deep, dark circles. The clothes were still expensive, but looked wrinkled. "Dad," he said, and it was the first time in a long time he called me that. Tears instantly started falling down my face. "Bruno," was all I could say. He looked around, saw there were people nearby, and asked if we could talk privately. My heart was racing, 1,000 thoughts going through my head. Had he changed? Had he finally realized what he had done? Had he come to apologize? We walked to a more secluded corner. He took off his hood, ran his hand through his hair nervously. "I need to tell you something," he began. "I need to explain everything." I remained silent, waiting. "When I won the lottery," he continued, "everything changed very quickly. Suddenly, I had money, more money than I had seen in my life, and with the money came the people. So many people, Dad, relatives I didn't even know existed, showed up asking for help. Friends who were never really my friends started to get closer, and that woman, Viviane, She appeared right at the beginning. She said she loved me, that she wanted to build a life with me, and I, idiot that I am, believed her. He paused, wiped the tears that were starting to fall. She started manipulating me from the beginning. She said you were going to want to take my money, that old father's a dead weight, that I needed to cut ties with the past to be able to live my present. And I, blinded by passion and money, believed every word. I started to see you as she made me see, as someone who was there only out of interest, even though you never asked for anything. I was cruel, Dad. I was the worst son that could exist. I was speechless, processing everything I was hearing. I stayed with her for months, he continued. I spent fortunes trying to satisfy her, buying jewelry, cars, trips, and she always wanted more. It was never enough. And the more I gave, the more she distanced me from everything and everyone. She distanced me from the few real friends I had, made me cut ties with the old neighbors, with the people who really cared about me. And especially, she made me expel you, the only person who really loved me unconditionally. It was only after months, he continued with an increasingly weak voice, that I discovered the truth. She had another man. She was with him the whole time, laughing at me, laughing at the fool who won the lottery and was paying for everything. I caught her red-handed in my own apartment in the bed I bought. And you know what she said? She said I was pathetic, that she had never loved me, that she was only with me for the money, and that now she had gotten everything she wanted she could leave. And she did. She simply left, taking a good part of the money I had transferred to her account over the months. Bruno was crying openly now. And the worst of all, Dad, was when I was alone in that big and empty apartment that I realized what I had done. I remembered your face when I expelled you. I remembered all the times you went through hardship for me. I remembered how you loved me, raised me, protected me. And I repaid you with cruelty. I looked for you, Dad. I went to the old shack, asked everyone, nobody knew. I went to police stations, hospitals, shelters. I spent months looking, until someone told me they had seen a man who looked like you doing volunteer work here. I couldn't speak, just cried. All that year of pain, of rejection, of loneliness, had an explanation. It wasn't a good explanation. It didn't justify what he had done, but it was an explanation. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, he said. I know I don't deserve it. I know I caused you pain that may never heal. But I needed to explain to you, I needed you to know that I always loved you, even when I was being blind, manipulated, and stupid. I needed you to know that not a day went by without me regretting what I did. I finally managed to speak. Why didn't you come sooner? Why did you wait so long? He swallowed hard. Because I was ashamed, Dad. Very ashamed. And because I needed to resolve some things first. I had to undo the knot I had created in my life. I had to understand who I really was without those fake people around me. Bruno took a deep breath before continuing. After Viviane left, several things started to happen. The friends she had brought into my life also disappeared. I discovered many of them were stealing from me, making fake investments with my money. I lost millions, Dad. Millions. From 50 million, less than half remained. But you know something? I don't care. That money only brought me disgrace. It transformed me into someone I don't recognize when I look in the mirror. He held my hands, those hands that had become so old and wrinkled. Dad, I can't go back in time. I can't undo the pain I caused you. But I can try, from today on, to be the son you deserve if you give me a chance, just one chance. I looked at that man in front of me, my son, and saw again the boy I had raised. I saw the boy who had nightmares and called me in the middle of the night. I saw the boy who was proud when he got a good grade at school and ran to show me. I saw the boy who hugged me tight and said that when he grew up, he would take care of me. And at that moment, even after everything, even after all the pain, all the suffering, all the abandonment, my father's heart spoke louder. Son, I said with a choked voice, I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. Even when you threw me on the street, even when you said those terrible things, I continued loving you. Because that's what a father does. A father loves unconditionally, even when it hurts, even when it's not reciprocated. We hugged there, In the middle of that simple place, two men broken by life trying to rebuild themselves. But that wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new phase. Bruno told me in the following days about everything that had happened since he expelled me. He told me about the false friendships, about the scams he suffered, about the manipulation he went through. But he also told me about something I didn't know, something he had kept secret all this time. He took me to the apartment. I was apprehensive. The memories of that place were painful, but he insisted I needed to see something. When we entered, I noticed the apartment was different. It no longer had that luxurious and cold decoration. It was simpler, more welcoming. He took me to the old room that had been mine. He opened the door, and I almost fainted with what I saw. The room was exactly as I had left it. My old bed was there, my few belongings, my photos on the walls, everything preserved, untouched. "I never turned this room into a closet," he said behind me. "After you left, I locked the door and never let anyone in again. Not Viviane, not anyone. Every day I came here, opened the door, looked at your things and hated myself for what I had done. But I didn't have the courage to go after you. I was afraid you would hate me. I was ashamed to face you." I sat on the bed, touching the things, incredulous. "But you said," I began. "I lied," he interrupted. "I lied about everything, about turning the room, about not wanting you here, about not giving a cent. All lies I said under the influence of that woman and those fake people. But in here," he beat his chest, "in here I knew the truth. I knew I was making the biggest mistake of my life." He opened the nightstand drawer and took out a folder. "There's more, Dad. From the second month after you left, I started doing something. I couldn't sleep well, felt guilty even without admitting it openly. So I started saving money for you. Every month I set aside a significant part and deposited it in an account I opened in your name. I was saving for when I found you. It's almost $2 million, Dad. It's yours. I'm not offering it to you now as a way to buy your forgiveness. This money was always yours. You deserve it for everything you did for me, for all the years you worked, that you suffered, that you went through hardship." I opened that folder and saw the statements, the receipts. It was true. He had really saved money for me all this time. But it wasn't the money that touched me. It was realizing that even in the darkness, even lost, a part of my son had never completely forgotten me. "There's another thing you need to know," Bruno continued. "Your health, Dad. I know it's bad. I went after your medical records when I was looking for you. I found the hospital where you were admitted, talked to the doctors. They said you need constant monitoring, that you have serious heart problems, that you need expensive and continuous medication. It's all arranged. I've already paid for a first-class health plan for you, already scheduled appointments with the best cardiologists in the city. You're going to have the treatment you need and deserve." I looked at my son and saw that he had cried a lot, probably as much as I had. "Bruno," I said, "these things are all important. They're very generous. But that's not what I want most. What I want most is my son back. It's to be able to be near you, talk to you, be part of your life again. The money, the treatments, all that is secondary. What killed me wasn't the poverty on the streets, it was the poverty of not having you." He knelt in front of me, rested his head on my lap, like he did when he was a child. "I'm here now, Dad, and I'm never leaving again, I promise. No matter what happens, no matter how much money I have or don't have, you'll always have a place in my life. You'll always have your home with me." The following days and weeks were of reconstruction. It was a slow and sometimes painful process. You can't simply forget a year of abandonment, of suffering, of feeling discarded like trash. There were moments when the anger came back, moments when I questioned whether I could really trust him again. There were nights when I woke up in cold sweat, dreaming I was back on the streets, that everything was just a cruel dream. But Bruno was there, every time, patient, understanding, willing to prove day after day that he had changed. He started including me in everything. He took me to medical appointments, stayed by my side during exams, wrote down everything the doctors said. He cooked for me, even hiring a cook, because he said he wanted to do it personally. We sat together to watch television, like we used to in the shack. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told me about his new plans, more humble and realistic. He had decided to invest the remaining money in safe things, live modestly off the income. and use part to help other people in need. He created a small fund to help single fathers in vulnerable situations, a way to honor what I had done for him. He also started working, not because he needed the money, but because he realized that being idle had contributed to his downfall. He opened a small construction company, ironically. He said he wanted to honor my profession, wanted to better understand the world where I lived and worked my whole life. And he actually worked. He wasn't just the owner. He went to the construction sites, learned from the masons, carried materials. He came home dirty and tired, and I saw in him a sparkle in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. It was the sparkle of someone who has purpose, of someone who is building something of value, not just in bricks, but in character. One day he came home with a proposal. "Dad, I want to do something special. I want to build a house, a simple but beautiful house, and I want it to be yours. Not here in this apartment that has so many bad memories, but in a new place, a place where you truly feel at home. And I want to build it myself with my own hands, just as you built our life with yours." I was moved by the idea. We went looking for land together and found one in a quiet neighborhood, not too far or too close to downtown. Bruno bought the land and started the project. He hired an architect but was very active in the planning, wanted every detail to be thought out for my comfort. A single-story house, no stairs so as not to tire my old legs, with a yard where I could have a vegetable garden because he remembered I always wanted one, with a wide porch where I could sit and watch the street movement, with a large and bright room, an adapted bathroom with support bars, a functional kitchen. During the months of construction, we went to the land almost every day. Bruno worked personally on the site, and I stayed there supervising, giving my opinion when they asked. It was beautiful to see my son sweaty, with hands dirty with cement, placing brick upon brick. It was as if he was symbolically rebuilding not only that house, but our relationship. The house was finished in 6 months. It was simple but beautiful, exactly as he had promised. On moving day, Bruno insisted on carrying me in his arms inside, even though I protested I was too old for that. He laughed, that good laugh I hadn't heard in so long, and said, "You carried me your whole life, Dad. Let me carry you once." At that moment, with my son carrying me into the house he had built for me, I felt it had been worth it. All the pain, all the suffering, everything. Because I was there, I had my son back, and we had a future ahead. The months turned into a year, and our relationship continued to strengthen. Bruno met someone new, a simple and genuine girl named Carla. She worked as a teacher in a public school, had solid values and a kind heart. Unlike Viviane, she treated Bruno and me with genuine affection and respect. Carla came frequently to my house, cooked with us, talked about everything. She asked about my life, listened to my old stories with real interest. I noticed Bruno had finally found someone who loved him for who he was, not for what he had. They started making plans to get married, and for the first time, Bruno included me in every detail. He asked my opinion about everything, from the ceremony location to the menu. He said he wanted a simple wedding, without ostentation, only with the people who really mattered. And I would be the best man, he insisted. One day, a few months before the wedding, Bruno called me for a serious conversation. We were sitting on my house porch having coffee and watching the sunset. "Dad," he began, "there's something I never told you about that day I expelled you from the apartment. Something I kept to myself because I was very ashamed, but I think you deserve to know." My heart tightened, preparing for another painful revelation. "After you left," he continued, "after I closed the door in your face, I went into my room and cried like I had never cried in my life. I knew I had made the worst possible mistake, but I was trapped in that fake life, in those fake people, in that distorted version of myself. Viviane came into the room, saw me crying, and you know what she did? She laughed. She said I was weak, that I was being dramatic, that I had made the right decision and would soon forget. It was at that moment I realized, really realized who I was with, but I was so involved, so manipulated, that it took more months until I could free myself. But there's another thing," he hesitated. "The day after you left, I followed you. I took my car and followed you through the streets. I saw you walking aimlessly, saw when you sat on that park bench and started crying. I stayed inside the car, parked far away, and cried too. I wanted to get out, wanted to run to you, wanted to hug you and ask for forgiveness. But I didn't have the courage. I was too cowardly. I continued following you for a few days from afar, making sure you were okay, or at least alive. When I saw you going to that shelter after the pneumonia, I felt relief mixed with more guilt. At least you were being cared for. But I never approached, never had the courage. I continued just watching from afar like a ghost, until one day I lost your trail and was desperate. I heard all that with mixed emotions. On one hand, it hurt to know he had seen me suffering and had done nothing. On the other hand, I understood the complexity of his situation, how he was trapped in a web of manipulation. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I don't want to have any more secrets with you, Dad. I want you to know everything, including the ugly parts, the parts I'm ashamed of. You deserve the whole truth, not an edited version that makes me look better than I was." I took a deep breath and took his hand. "Son, the past is the past. What matters is that you learned, that you changed, that you're here now. We're not going to live looking back anymore. We're going to live looking forward to the future we still have together." Bruno and Carla's wedding was beautiful. Simple as they wanted, but full of love and real people. When they asked me to make a speech at dinner, I got up on the small stage with trembling legs and a full heart. I looked at all those present and began, "My life was never easy. I went through poverty, loneliness, illnesses, and worst of all, I went through the pain of losing a son while he was still alive. But I also went through the joy of finding him back, not just alive, but transformed into a better man. The Bruno who is here today is not the same one who won the lottery and got lost along the way. This Bruno is someone who faced his shadows, recognized his mistakes, and had the courage to change them. This Bruno is the son I always knew he could be." I had to stop because tears were falling freely. I forgive my son for everything that happened, not because he didn't hurt, not because it wasn't difficult, but because that's a father's role. A father loves unconditionally, forgives infinitely, and never gives up on his children. And to you, Carla, I say, welcome to our small family. Take care of my boy. Help him stay on this path of light and be happy. Because happiness isn't in money, isn't in material things. It's in simple moments, in sincere hugs, in the love that is built day by day with patience and dedication. When I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Bruno came to me, hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for never giving up on me, Dad. Thank you for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that love." Today, 3 years after that fateful day when I was expelled from home, I'm sitting on the porch of my house, the house my son built for me with his own hands. The sun is setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. My health is better, controlled with the medications and regular medical monitoring that Bruno provided. I have my vegetable garden in the backyard, where I plant tomatoes, lettuce, seasonings. It's therapy, taking care of those little plants, watching them grow. Bruno comes to visit me almost every day, sometimes with Carla, sometimes alone. We talk, laugh, make plans. They're expecting a baby, my grandson, who will be born in a few months. They've already chosen the name, John, in my honor. When they told me this, I cried with emotion. I know many people wouldn't understand my forgiveness. Many would say Bruno didn't deserve it, that what he did was unforgivable, that I was weak for accepting him back. But those people don't understand a father's love. They don't understand that a father doesn't love because the child deserves it, but loves because he can't do otherwise. A father's love is not conditional, has no expiration date, doesn't end because you were hurt. It hurts, yes. It hurts, yes. It leaves scars, yes. But it continues existing, pulsing, waiting for a chance to manifest itself again. What did I learn from all this? I learned that money really doesn't bring happiness. It brings comfort, removes immediate worries, but doesn't fill the void of the soul. I learned that fake people show themselves in prosperity, but the real ones appear in the storm. I learned it's never too late to start over, to change, to be better. I learned that forgiving is not forgetting. It's choosing not to let bitterness consume you. I learned that family is not just about blood, it's about who is by your side in the worst moments. And I learned, above all, that true love survives any storm. The money Bruno saved for me is invested. I don't need to work anymore. I have enough to live comfortably until my last days. But the most important thing isn't having that money. It's having my son back. It's having a reason to wake up every day. It's having someone who cares if I ate, if I took my medications, if I'm okay. It's having someone to share coffee on the porch, a conversation about anything, a tight hug before leaving. It's having love in my life again after thinking I would never have it again. I look at that sunset and think about everything I went through. The life of a mason, the years of struggle raising Bruno alone, the joy when he won the lottery, the pain when he expelled me, the suffering on the streets, the illness, the loneliness, and then the reunion, the forgiveness, the reconstruction. It was a long and painful journey, but it taught me things I would never have learned any other way. It taught me about strength, about resilience, about the human capacity to transform. It taught me that nothing is lost while there is love, while there is willingness to change, to try again. The secret my son kept was not a material secret, not about hidden money or wills or inheritances. It was an emotional secret, a secret about who he really was underneath that mask of coldness and rejection. It was the secret that, even when he was hurting me, a part of him never stopped loving me, never stopped caring, never stopped keeping a space for me in his heart and in his life. It was the secret that he was just lost, not lost forever, and that eventually he would find his way back. And he did. My son found his way back home, back to me, back to who he really is. Now, as night falls and the first stars begin to appear in the sky, I get up from the chair slowly, leaning on my old but still functional legs, and go inside the house. I'm going to prepare dinner. I'm going to wait for Bruno's visit, who promised to come today. I'm going to continue living this second chance that life gave me. And I'm going to do it with gratitude, with hope, and with a lot of love. Because in the end, love is all that matters. Love is what sustains us in falls, what lifts us in stumbles, what gives us strength to forgive the unforgivable and believe in the impossible. A father's love is like that, infinite and unconditional, crosses time and space, survives betrayals and abandonments, and in the end, always prevails. Are you enjoying this story? Then help the channel grow. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity now and subscribe. It's completely free. And this way you'll keep receiving emotional stories that touch the heart and stay in your memory. Oh, and don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one, waiting for you. This is my story. The story of a father who loved too much, suffered too much, but in the end had the chance to see his son transform and return. It's not a perfect story. It doesn't have a fairy tale ending where everything is forgotten and everyone lives happily ever after. The scars are still here, the pain still visits from time to time, but it's a real story of real people, with real flaws and real regrets. It's a story about redemption, about second chances, about the transforming power of true love. And it's my story, the story I lived, and now tell to whoever wants to listen, in the hope that maybe, just maybe, it inspires someone not to give up, to keep loving, to believe that while there is life, there is hope for reconciliation and for a new beginning.